Has Optus scored an own goal with its English Premier League pricing?
And are Aussies entitled to pirate Game of Thrones? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm here with a man who's actively pondering claiming to be a long-lost relative of Prince's, Adam Turner. We're also joined by APN news editor and Arsenal fan, Patrick Avenell. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Alex.
Adam, what's new in tech?
Taking wearable tech to a whole new level of creepy, Sony has patented a digital contact lens designed to record everything you see, track your eye movements, and let you take photos with a blink. The lens would feature built-in storage, and Sony proposes to power it using wireless charging from an external device like a smartphone or a tablet.
Dick Smith lives. No, not the entrepreneur, although I'm pretty sure he's still with us, but the brand, with buyer Kogan relaunching it this week as an online-only operation. So far, though, the differences between Dick Smith Online and Kogan Online only seem to extend to brand colours. The national broadband network has passed 2 million premises as the rollout gains momentum, although so far it only has 1 million active connections. The network will have reached more than 5 million homes by the middle of next year, although much of that will come from the NBN taking control of the existing pay TV cable networks. Facebook has paid out $10,000 to a hacker that managed to uncover a weakness in Instagram as part of its bug bounty program. The twist in the tale here is that the hacker in this case is a 10-year-old Finnish boy, too young in fact to have his own Facebook account. In entirely unrelated news, I have some bug-chasing homework for my kids the moment I finish recording this podcast, and I suspect Adam has the same idea.
So Alex, the big dick is back. Does it really matter whether Dick Smith is Dick Smith?
Well, it hasn't mattered as a technology brand for decades now. This is one of those things that people always forget. He actually sold the name and the rights decades ago and went on to do foodstuffs and all sorts of other things. So in one sense, it hasn't entirely mattered. In this case, whilst Kogan was patting itself on the back by a press release saying that it launched the brand months earlier than it had planned to, it appears to be a bit more of a paint job rather than an entirely exciting new store, because an awful lot of what they're offering is stuff that Kogan is offering.
Yeah.
Now, Patrick, I know you've got a background in this kind of retail technology business. What's your take on the relaunch of Dick Smith?
I can tell you from the perspective of their rivals that the people like Harvey Norman and the Good Gear guy and the Good Guys, they would certainly have just wished that Dick Smith had been allowed to die. I remember speaking to executives from the big groups for a long time saying that 4 major groups was too many in consumer electronics, the fourth being JB Hi-Fi, and they all thought that the market in Australia wasn't big enough, so they would have preferred it if Dick Smith had just died and the brand had disappeared completely. I guess it launching as an online-only store and just an arm of an existing player in Kogan, it won't give them too many headaches. They already hate Kogan enough. This isn't going to add to that animus. But it's just more downward pressure on prices, which retailers hate and consumers love.
Is it a smart move by Kogan? Is there really that much value left in the Dick Smith brand, and by keeping it Kogan's actually diluting their own brand by sending people elsewhere?
It depends on whether you think that people have picked up the Dick Smith collapse by osmosis. Sometimes we overestimate how much people read the news and follow news stories as intimately as we do. And if they haven't picked up the disaster that tracked Dick Smith over the past 12 months, they might still think it's a strong brand, a good brand, and they might not have heard of Kogan, or they might not trust Kogan because he's young and online only. So it depends on how many people fit into that field.
So it could actually help Kogan pick up a few people who may never have looked at Kogan in the past, but hey, I've heard of that Dick Smith guy, he's alright.
It also depends, of course, on exactly what Kogan paid for the rights. It could be a very, very cheap play for him that just garners him a second brand in the same way that Kmart and Target are under the same kind of housing. It could be where in the future, because certainly right now there's not a whole lot of difference, but it could be where in the future he sells his slightly more upmarket gear where Kogan continues its own brand, quite affordable gear. For example, that's one strategy he could undertake, I suppose.
So Dick Smith could be the Qantas to his Jetstar?
Something like that, yes. But presumably without leather seats. So, Adam, Optus has finally revealed what EPL fans will pay for their football fix, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of them are pretty unhappy.
Yeah, they're unhappy, but it's not really just about price. It's about the hoops that you have to jump through to watch. As it was, the English Premier League was on Foxtel, and the minimum you'd be paying Foxtel is $50 a month to watch that. Now that it's through Optus, you can't just say to Optus, oh, I'll give you $50 a month or however much. You have to actually be an Optus customer for something else. You have to either be an Optus fixed line broadband customer at home or an Optus mobile customer. So suddenly you need to perhaps change your internet service provider or change your phone provider just so you can watch the football. So you can imagine why some people are pretty unhappy about that.
Yeah, I mean, Optus is a big player in this market, though at the same time, I suppose, there'd be a reasonable number of Optus customers on some of their broadband packages especially, but even on some of their mobile packages, who will suddenly be getting the EPL for no extra as well. But, having said that, I know I am not, and regular listeners will be well aware, I am not a big sports guy, but we do have one with us. Patrick, what's your take on the EPL pricing?
I'm sort of in a very strange position because as a committed fan, I'm inelastic in my support, but I'm also a person who fits into getting the coverage for free on my mobile. My plan is already expensive enough that I get the Premier League for free. So I'm complaining about something that I'm getting for free because I think it is very poor strategy and very poor pricing. It's also very confusing for a lot of people. The biggest problem I see it is that I don't really want to get up at 3 a.m. to watch my football team play on my mobile phone. I want to watch it as a broadcast program on television. And when you do watch sport on your phone or on your TV via Apple TV over the internet, you are looking at a 1 to 2 minute delay. And there really is no way to improve that, especially not with Australian internet speeds. And that takes the whole social experience out of it, and also takes betting on games, if you do like to gamble, out of the equation. And I don't think that Optus has properly thought this through.
Was Foxtel any better on this?
Foxtel was much better. Foxtel was around about 8 to 10 seconds behind play, which when you think about it, it's very hard to write a tweet saying that a goal has been scored in that amount of time. So you were never really spoilt.
Depends on how many L's you put in goal, I suppose.
Well, if you're watching South American football, you'll definitely be safe.
So you can watch it on your television, though, but then you've got to pay more. You can either pay to have Optus broadband with a Fetch TV box, which is a streaming box, and watch it, again, streamed over the internet, so it's probably going to be on that delay, but the Fetch TV box will plug in to your television. The other thing that they're going to do is they're going to start selling a little Fetch mini box for $5 a month, a bit like the Apple TV or the Telstra TV, and you can buy this if you're an Optus mobile customer and plug it into your home broadband. Doesn't matter who supplies your home broadband. Plug it into your home broadband and plug it into your television. So it basically acts as a bridge between the internet and your television, so you can watch it on the TV. So this way you're not watching it on your tiny phone or your tablet, but you do have still have all those other issues that Patrick talked about. Plus, you're at the mercy of your broadband connection. Not everybody has broadband that's fast enough or reliable enough to do this justice. And there are some places where in the country where you actually just cannot get Optus home broadband and cannot get decent, if at all, Optus mobile. So I don't know what's going to happen to these people.
For some of them, Optus are actually offering it as a service, albeit it's pretty freaking expensive, but they are actually offering it as a satellite service as well. That may cover some of that market. But it strikes me there's potentially, Optus probably won't thank me for this, but there's potentially an opportunity here. If you know someone like Patrick, not Patrick himself, because I'm sure he will want to watch his own EPL coverage, but if you know someone with a sufficiently high grade enough Optus mobile package, in theory, if you were willing to shout them the $5 for the Fetch mini box, you could set that up with your own broadband and, I guess, watch EPL for $5 a month.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I was on the radio this afternoon. I said there'll be a little bit like sharing of Netflix logins and HBO logins. There'll be a lot of, hey mate, have you got an Optus phone? I'll trade you my Telstra login for something else going on.
Well, there's definitely a market for subletting Foxtel Go accounts. I'm a Foxtel subscriber, so I have 3 Foxtel Go passes, and I've at different times let friends log in if they haven't had access to Foxtel but wanted to watch something.
Which is within their terms and conditions. There's nothing specifically wrong with that either. They allow that on a limited number of devices. It'll be fascinating, in fact, to see how Optus controls this, because with a Fetch box, it really is fairly heavily controlled. Oh, an Optus fetch box, and I know this because up until quite recently I had one. It really is quite heavily controlled. They even have their own specific Optus firmware, which is different to the stuff that iiNet used to sell back when they used to sell Fetch. Quite more feature limited, in fact. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the Fetch Mini in that respect. There is always the other option, and this was something that I explored, at least in a kind of numbers breakdown way, which would be to go and see EPL coverage at a pub, because Optus has indicated that they're open to venue licensing. Patrick, does that have a lot of appeal to you?
It has very little appeal to me, Alex, and I'll lay out the reasons why. The first one is that it's hard enough at the moment to go to a pub at 9:45 p.m, which is the earliest time a Premier League game starts in Australia, and get them to change the channel. Bar staff aren't really as accomplished at TV tuning as sports fans would like, let alone at 2 in the morning, and then most pubs aren't even open at that time anymore because of various lockout laws. So it doesn't really appeal to me to go to a pub, especially when you're at the pub, you're not going to be able to beat that delay, because everybody will be checking their phones, and as soon as a goal is scored, such as the build-up of emotion leading up to a goal, people are going to celebrate that straight away, beating the TV coverage. And I don't know whether you've ever actually tried to watch streaming sport at a pub. I actually once watched Arsenal play in Boston on ESPN3, which is ESPN's online channel in America, and the way it stutters, the way it staggers, the buffering, pubs just don't put the amount of effort into their internet connection as you would hope as a tech fan, as the three of us are, put into our home connection. I can see it being a very poor situation for pubs, especially the pubs who rely on the Premier League trade. A lot of the backpacker places around central stations in Sydney and Melbourne rely on that trade, so I think it'll be very poor for their business.
Presumably, though, if they're paying for the EPL through Optus, they're going to go, well, we're paying an additional fee on top of, and what I know a lot of pubs do, a Fox Sports fee. We're paying for this, we'd better make sure we've at least got it on, though.
You'd be surprised. Actually, in a past life, I worked on a magazine called Fox Sports Venues, which was sort of the trade magazine for pubs that had Fox Sports. It gets sent out monthly with all the major programming, and you'd be surprised by how little effort the pubs would put into putting on a good show, despite the fact they're paying an enormous surcharge to get Foxtel in their establishment. And I assume that Optus, the markup on the Premier League is going to be astronomical compared to what the punters are paying.
And of course, the other thing that you've got to take into account, it's just like Game of Thrones, is there are other ways to watch it without giving anybody any money. I don't know. I know that there are ways to watch foreign football on live stream online for sports. I don't know how popular they are, but I'm pretty sure they're going to become more popular.
Oh, they've definitely been growing in popularity over the last few years,
and quality
I can chart this from my quality. I can chart this from my trips to CES for Las Vegas for CES. In that every year that I went, the quality of me watching Arsenal in my hotel room got better and better on these illegal streams. So I can only imagine that by the time the next Premier League kicks off, there'll almost be a cottage industry of getting these games out in really high-quality internet streams.
All right, so Alex, Game of Thrones has kicked off its own little battle in Australia. Arguments about whether or not it's okay to not pay for Game of Thrones. Where do you sit in this debate?
Well, look, I think my position's actually become extremely well known of late, although it's been somewhat misrepresented in some ways. To give a little bit of background to this, a journalist at Kotaku, a guy called Mark Serrels, a good friend of mine, wrote a piece about why he's choosing to pirate Game of Thrones. In essence, he tried to pay for Foxtel Play. It would not work for him. It gave him all sorts of headaches, so he abandoned that mode of thinking and has decided that it's acceptable for him to pirate. He may buy the Blu-rays. These are the statements that he's made, and I'm not trying to misrepresent him in any way there. I wrote a response piece to that because whilst, if Foxtel Play is rubbish, and so many people say this, and I'm not going to doubt it, my own experiences with it have not been terribly satisfactory, I'm perfectly fine with you not paying for it, and I know in some corners I've been painted as a Foxtel apologist. Believe me, I'm not, but I'm perfectly fine with you not paying for it. But as with any other service or product, if you don't pay for it, this does not automatically give you the right to to then take it, whether you view that as copyright infringement or theft or any of the other circular piracy arguments. Mark then came back with another piece which I have not particularly responded to because, as I stated in my original piece, these things do just tend to get a bit circular, and that's kind of where we sit with this, that a lot of people are now kind of viewing an entitlement to Game of Thrones, and I totally understand and respect the idea of people not wanting to be spoiled, for example, but I just think that, you know, especially for creative professionals, it's a little bit disappointing for people to say, well, I will just take this thing anyway because I have an entitled right to it. And I totally understand. People don't like being called entitled, but when you act in an entitled manner, you know, that's what I'm going to call you. Especially given some of the other stuff that's come out around this, around the Productivity Commission suggesting that geododging might be a legitimate avenue for Australians. For the record, I actually don't have so much of a problem with that because you're making a good faith effort to pay.
You're still paying, yeah.
But, yeah. That's kind of my 30-second take on it. Patrick, what's your view on the whole issue of Game of Thrones piracy in Australia?
Well, as a fully paid up Foxtel subscriber, I think that everyone should follow my lead and should subscribe to Foxtel, and then we wouldn't have this problem. But
you don't
maybe
own
that's
shares or anything,
I'm,
do you?
No, it's probably because I'm just paying so much money to watch the Premier League that I get Game of Thrones for free on top of it at the moment. I read Mark's posts and I read your post as well. Mark's post sort of came across a bit of self-justification for me. And when you start self-justifying, it's a sign that there's a bit of cognitive dissonance going on. I think Mark acknowledges actually that he is guilty about illegally downloading Game of Thrones or pirating it or, you know, getting it through nefarious means, and that he wrote that post almost to salve his conscience of it. And I didn't find it particularly convincing. I think that people do feel entitled to watch Game of Thrones because it is a very popular show and it's a cultural touch point. A lot of people can't afford to pay for Foxtel to watch it because it can be expensive for some people who might be tighter with their money than I am, because I'm not particularly tight with money. I think that for those people, they should probably go without, to be honest. And I think that you don't have a right to watch shows that you're not prepared to pay for.
But to play the other side of the fence here, I can see Serrals makes a good point about the fact that if you're going to charge for this stuff, you have to have a decent delivery platform. And I think Optus is going to run into the exact same problem with the EPL. If they can't deliver it properly, people are going to say, well, I'm paying you for this thing, I'm trying to do the right thing, and you're making it so terrible that to get what I have paid for, I'm going to source it elsewhere. So if they want to build these business models where they are going to get exclusive access to content and lock it away and only let you consume it in a certain manner, then they have to make sure that that's up to scratch, or this is the result that you get.
I don't have a problem with saying, you know, Foxtel is not providing a service, especially on Play, that is good enough. It's standard definition only. There's really no excuse for that. This is something on which Mark and I totally agree, and his own experiences with it seem to suggest that he had an even worse time of it because he couldn't access anything. That's fine. I think the jump then to say, well, then we're just going to take it, yeah, that's a logical jump too far. That doesn't particularly wash with me.
We have this argument every year now, for 10 weeks every year in Australia. We have this argument about how Foxtel should merchandise Game of Thrones. The fact is, it's an open bidding market, and they bid the most to secure the rights to the show. That money pays for the enormous production budgets that Game of Thrones has, which makes it such a great show. I think that if people want it to get it for free, or they want it to be on broadcast television with ads and shown at 10 p.m, they have to lobby the networks to do it. But I think that would end up with we'd be much worse off for that. I think that if you don't want to subscribe to Foxtel, I think that you should be prepared to wait until the end of the season and buy it on iTunes.
I was a bit dirty that they took away those options. There was the option that you could buy it on iTunes the next day after every episode was there, and I don't
think that was in Foxtel's plan, that one.
No, it wasn't, but to take that away seemed a bit rough. That these people were doing the right thing. Every one of those people who paid iTunes the next day, by that time, could have stolen it for free, but chose not to because they wanted to do the right thing. And it seems a bit rich to me when you take away options like that and then complain that people go down other paths.
Can I ask a question? How much does it normally cost to buy an episode the day after it airs? It's not something I normally do, being a subscriber.
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe $3 to $5.
It's been a long while since I've done it because it's been a long while since I could do it.
Yeah.
From memory, it was around the $4 to $5 an episode, or $30 to $40 for a season.
Yeah.
It was not exceptionally expensive, in my view.
Do you think that if there was a Foxtel premium, say $8 for a Game of Thrones episode the day after, do you think that would be a fair price?
And you didn't have to sign up for Foxtel. You could just give Foxtel $8.
Well, so you buy it from iTunes, but because Foxtel will want a premium,
Okay.
it costs, say, double what a normal 1 hour TV show costs.
People will still bitch and moan about it, but
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a step in the right direction.
The problem there, and it's the classic problem, nobody can actually agree on what a fair price is. I fairly consistently see Netflix get pulled into this, with people saying, oh, well, Netflix is $12 or so a month, and that's in HD, and that's across multiple devices without the limitations that Foxtel applies. And I think those are fair technical arguments. But that being said, even Netflix's own original stuff is made on a budget that's an absolute shoestring of the Game of Thrones budget. And that's why they can afford to do that. And they're increasingly focusing on those original pieces rather than on licensing out other content for people. Their library is actually shrinking, not growing in real terms.
Mm.
I think that if HBO Go comes to Australia, they'll have a platform that will be similar to Netflix, where it'll be more expensive. It might be $20 a month, but it will have a whole range of original programming and then backed up with their library of content. But until then, I think we're still just going to have to suck it up with the cable TV model in Australia.
I have this funny feeling, without having seen the documentation, that HBO is probably blocked from launching here while Foxtel's paying it that much money.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was whether you guys think that the ABC having a lot of really high quality British content, and I know, Alex, you're a big Doctor Who fan, has perhaps sort of got people too accustomed to ABC's content delivery system, which is, it's government funded, it's free, we've got iView to catch up, it's HD, whether that we've sort of grown too accustomed to that.
It's not just the ABC, it's Australians in general. I don't think quite realise how lucky and how spoiled they are, and how much is actually on free-to-air, and how much of what we watch on free-to-air would be at least basic cable TV in the US. So it does come to a shock to us, as a shock to us still, when someone says, "Oh, that's locked behind a paywall." Whereas also, like in the UK with the football there, if you didn't have Sky at one point, then you just didn't watch the football. End of discussion. So we've kind of been a bit spoiled.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the reality for the ABC, and I love the ABC and I support the ABC, is the ABC is not free. I mean, it actually isn't. It's taxpayer funded. That's how that works. Commercial TV is advertising funded. That's how that works. There's still a payment. There's still a product to be sold. The commercial networks sell us as consumers. The ABC gets its funding from the government when it, can be encouraged to open up the purse strings a little. And I think what the ABC's done with iView has actually been exceptional given the budgets involved. And as you say, yes, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I'm very happy that they get that particular show nice and quickly, and that's not locked away on Foxtel. But that being said, it's still something that ultimately people are paying for. The comparison against overseas is a really fascinating one, because it's the argument that also gets put up, it's so much cheaper overseas. Well, yeah, I mean, you just discussed it then, Adam, but yeah, it isn't. In an awful lot of cases, it's actually more expensive. But at the same time, I do wonder how many people are already jumping on the HBO Go bandwagon, because whilst there's a few hoops to jump in terms of buying applicable credit that HBO Go will accept, because they will block an Australian credit card, they're not terribly difficult hoops, are they?
They did make it a bit harder, but you can still get in.
And that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page. Thanks to Patrick for joining us this week.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Adam. Great fun.
And thanks for joining us, everyone. Remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button.